What was the big rumor in your high school that turned out to be true? That an English teacher was using hard drugs. It's pretty sad, actually. He was just a regular guy who destroyed his knee, so after surgery he got painkillers, got hooked on them, and then eventually started using H. Nobody really believed it until he abruptly went on leave. He was gone for most of the school year, and when he eventually got sober and came back, he told his story to the students to try to show them how dangerous that stuff is, and confirmed everything to be true. I'm glad he got himself clean and used his experience to teach kids the actual consequences of drugs and how easy anyone can get hooked. I hope he is still clean now. There was an 18-year-old freshman who was pregnant, and there was a joke spread around that this was her fourth kid. They said she was first pregnant at 12 years old, and that was why she never finished 9th grade. I actually made friends with her because we both walked a mile in PE, and I felt bad that people were spreading this rumor and making fun of someone who was obviously trying to better themselves for the baby. Well, turns out, it was actually her 5th kid. She had one set of twins at the age of 13, then at 14 she was trying to be a mother of 2 and finished 9th grade, but she got pregnant again and dropped out. I realize now that the entire situation was very concerning. I hope she got some guidance. On a ski trip, the phys ed teacher allegedly porked the science teacher. Someone saw him go into her room in the middle of the night. They denied it, but years later, they got married. That the English teacher had been sleeping with students. I found out when I was a freshman in 2008. Fast forward 8 years later, the chemistry teacher got caught and decided to bring the English teacher down with him to get some heat off his back. A total of 3 teachers went to jail. The big rumor wasn't about my high school, but a school on the east side of town. The rumor was a bunch of girls were running a prostitution ring out of the school, and turns out it was true. PD went undercover and busted about a dozen girls. Dr. Palermo, the band teacher, never received his doctorate in music like he claimed. It was weird. He used to force all his students to address him as doctor, but when he came back from his leave of absence, we all called him by Mr. like nothing happened. There were rumors for years about some of the younger male teachers and female students. Some of the teachers ended up leaving never to be spoken of again. Others stuck around, but nothing was ever substantiated. Then, while my class was on our senior trip, the music teacher got arrested. Then 2 more teachers the following year. Then several years went by and the school abruptly announced it was shutting down for financial reasons, 2 weeks before the end of the school year. The week after it closed for good, another teacher got arrested. That our science teacher was kind of a creep. I always thought he was nice. Years later, he was fired and arrested for aggravated CP. Aggravated means possessing 100 or more separate pieces depicting CP. At my old high school, I was always told that if you go to school after dark, in certain conditions, you'd see a bunch of swastikas painted on the brick walls of the building. I thought it was fake because if they're really painted on there, why can't you see them at all times? One night I stayed late for an art club meeting. We were studying photo exposure and playing with some light tubes to make cool pictures, so we were having the meeting outside in the dark. As we were messing around, I approached the building from a certain angle and saw them. I don't know if it was spray paint that got scrubbed off or some kind of residue or chemical on the bricks, or if someone sprayed them with a clear coat or something, but they were very obviously on the wall. The softball coach in his 40s was dating one of his players. It turned out to be a sophomore, so she was 15 or 16 at the time. He left his wife and kids for her, but she soon realized he was a creep and ended things. His punishment was a 1 whole year suspension from coaching, but kept his teaching job somehow. That one of the English teachers used to physically assault kids. No one believed it because he was elderly and very kind. One day he told our class that back in the 80s, when he was teaching, anytime a kid got mouthy or started to fight in his classroom, he would pick them up physically and throw them out of his class. He gave a kid a concussion once because he bounced his head off a locker. They sent him to anger management classes, but he stayed teaching at the school until his retirement. My quite elderly math teacher threw a kid out of their classroom while still at their desk because the student was being a shizhead. The school fired him and the kid's parents sued the school on my teacher's behalf for unlawful termination because they knew how much of a shizhead their kid was, and the school settled by paying him to retire. I miss that man. He was a great teacher. It was a few years after I graduated, but a student baked cookies for their entire history class and handed them out one day. Several days later, the student informed everyone that she had actually baked her recent grandfather's ashes into the cookies, and so everyone had eaten some of her dead grandpa. A lot of folks just thought it was a bizarre stunt, until some of the cookies that hadn't been eaten were sent to the local PD for testing and, sure enough, contained human remains. I was in college and was seeing headlines about the school because it was briefly international news, I think, and had to text some of my friends that still had younger siblings at the school so I could find out what happened. That I was hacking into the computer systems. Because of this, my only failing grade my senior year was, ironically, the computer courses. To be clear, I was failed. I did not fail. I got perfect scores on everything in that class. I was a tech student at my school, so I had admin access to everything. This is why she thought I was hacking. The teacher simply marked my grades as zeros for that class. I got a 0 in that class. So the day after school technically ended, I logged into the system under admin login and changed my grades back to what they were. I had all of the papers still showing I got perfect scores in case there was a fight. There never was. I could see it now. Your teacher is sitting at her dimly lit office at her computer, a glass of red wine in her hand. She smiles as she watches the cursor jump around the different text fields, the numbers changing seemingly on their own from zeros to hundreds. She takes a long, slow sip of her wine and whispers, well done, you've passed the final exam. The biggest rumor in my high school was that one of the science teachers / baseball coach was begging the health teacher or volleyball coach. He was at every volleyball game. She came to most of the baseball games. People would say that they saw his truck at her apartment complex. Somebody said they saw them together at a concert 200 miles from home. Both of them constantly got asked if they were messing around on their boyfriend / girlfriend with each other, and both denied it for an entire year. Yeah, it turned out they'd been dating for 3 years like adults can do and just kept it a secret from students because high school students suck. They got married the summer after I graduated. So 2 consenting single adults were dating consensually, and all the high school kids were spreading rumors and speculation? Teenagers are terrible and should mind their own business. For years, there was a rumor of a secret room in the gyms that had a pool table in it. It was one of the first things you learned about the school, and despite many lies told by pupils seeking short-lived glory, it was strenuously denied by staff at the school. About 5 years after I left the school, it was demolished. The school was, during my time, the second lowest OSFED ranked school in the country, and had a Channel 4 documentary filmed about its staff who dealt with the hardest kids to teach. Its demolish was not a shock. They stopped intake of new pupils and ran down the clock on those still there, but due to some delays, the handover from school site to the new building developers, a small retirement village and health center, the janitorial staff were kept on to keep the place safe and secure over a 2 to 3 month period. On their last couple of days, they did a full site-wide inspection and someone decided to take photos along the way. They went into all the buildings, large or minor, and into staff areas seldom seen by students, but not controversial. The photos documented the areas of the school that had begun to be disused and abandoned in its final few years, already damaged or graffiti strewn. Old furniture piled in that classroom we did Year 8 IT in. The untuned piano in the hall already sold off or given away, who knows. A couple of years later, one of the people who went on this mystery tour uploaded a full set to a now deleted Facebook profile. For those who attended the school in its final years, it was interesting to see what had become of the place we spent 5 years becoming young adults in, seeing perspectives from angles new to us, such as up on the roofs of the single-story outbuildings. And in the last couple of photos, a tour into the dark, dank boiler room that served both of the equally ancient gyms. And almost at the very end, a photo of those janitorial staff playing a game of pool. At my high school, 2 kids, who were cousins, were dating. They always denied it, but a lot of people still believed it. They did look weirdly similar, but a lot of people just chalked it up to coincidence. About a year later, they broke up and totally stopped interacting. Rumors started that their parents got involved or found out and shut it down, and it was again left to speculation. At our 5-year reunion, somebody who knew their family said it turned out that the rumor about them being cousins wasn't true. They were half-siblings and didn't even know until their parents put it together one day. So kind of true? That one of the students in our junior year, who reportedly had a serious drug habit, was snorting at school. Gym teacher found him in the boys' locker room bathroom snorting a line off the toilet seat. Kid spent his summer break in rehab, came back to graduate a clean senior, then started up the snorting again. Haven't heard much about him since. Had a guy in high school who was known as the party guy. He was always the life of the party doing crazy stuff. There were rumors about him being on all kinds of heavy stuff, but most assumed that this was just gossip and he was only really drinking and smoking weed. Turns out the gossip was right. He OD'd on some kind of cocktail of drugs his freshman freshman year in college. Not a speedball, but something similar. His death really shook a lot of people and opened up others' eyes to addiction. Looking back at all those parties he was so much fun at, people realized he was just so effed up and high. It was really sad. There were always rumors of sexually inappropriate behavior by the priest who was the principal at my Catholic high school. Lo and behold, I later found his name listed in the Los Angeles Diocese Directory of Predator Priests. He had abused several women who came to him for relationship counseling. So there was a rumor going around that a teacher was a real creep. I had been saying things to some female students that made them really uncomfortable. I had a class with this teacher and he always gave me uncomfortable vibes. A few girls had even claimed they had seen him looking at their chests, but no one could really prove anything. One day in the middle of class, we get a knock on the door and 3 sheriff's deputies enter the room and tell everyone to remain calm and then inform our teacher that they have a warrant for his arrest. They place him in handcuffs and take him out of the room. Apparently, he had been making very sexual advances toward one of the girls in his class, and her father was a deputy of our sheriff's department. She had told him what happened and he had a warrant placed for his immediate arrest. Never saw the teacher again, but everyone saw his mugshot. The really effed up part is whatever he said to her messed her up so much that she dropped out of school and was homeschooled until graduation. Poor girl. There was a rumor that an incoming freshman had gotten so drunk over the summer that he had passed out on a golf course and golfers found him the next morning and thought he was dead. They called to report a dead body. I know the rumor is true because the kid was me. When I was a freshman, some seniors were counterfeiting money. This was around 2004 to 05. They made some pretty convincing bills and spent them around town, including the school cafeteria. That year, I learned that the Secret Service has a counterfeit investigations department. Texas public school before the reform. Schools were financed and run by the tax revenue of the neighborhood. You can imagine how that worked out. Rumor was they were dumping teachers that were going to be fired from higher income schools into our lower income school. Turned out not only were they, but some of the teachers were being fired for things like giving drugs to students, sleeping with students, and being drunk during class. The guy who taught chemistry was a notorious pedo, and they were just like, give them to the poor kids, they don't matter. That the black van in the parking lot was a big-time drug dealer, and that's where the senior student who was dealing pot and coke got his supply. This was in white as F northeast US upper middle class suburbia. Turns out it was actually the local police collecting enough evidence on him to jump him in the parking lot after school, in front of everyone, with about 5 police cars, too many for one 18-year-old kid, and arrest him. They waited until 2 days after he turned 18 to do this, likely so there'd be no doubt about trying him as an adult. That the 10th grade English teacher had a thing for students. I remember when I was in his class, he would make me stay behind after everyone had just left to talk. Freaked me out a bit, but otherwise harmless. Years later, my sister, who was now in his class, told me he was recently suspended for blackmailing a student of his into going to dinner with him if she wanted a better grade. Her parents found out and reported it to the principal. Turns out all these rumors about him being an absolute creep were all true. Last I heard, he was fired, but he was old enough at that point that he was close enough to retirement. There are a couple that turned out to be true-ish. I went to high school in the 80s. The abortion list at the school was a thing, but not quite in the way we thought it was. The rumor was that the school kept a list of all the girls who had abortions. The school had a list of discreet abortion providers that was given to girls who wanted or needed it, confirmed to me by the principal several years later. The second was the drug dealing teacher. We had a Spanish teacher who was alleged to be a big-time drug dealer, lived in a huge house that there was no way he could afford on a teacher's salary, drove fancy cars, 2 to 3 times a teacher's annual salary, took lavish international vacations, frequently to South America, etc. When I was a freshman, I heard these rumors, and they all kept up all the way until midway through my senior year when he was arrested at school by the FBI. Turns out when he was younger, he had several flights of to the country and made a bunch of money, and then got out. So that part was true, and became a teacher. Turns out he was involved in all kinds of mail and wire fraud to sustain his lifestyle. Last I heard, he had gotten out of prison after 15 or so years, and then the rumor he had murdered someone, and was back in prison for life. That the kind and popular teacher secretly makes students get bullied. He's very popular, young, good-looking, and very kind. Guys look up to him, and girls have crushes on him. Because of this, students will practically despise students that get special treatment. But turns out, that is his way to get rid of bad students. He intentionally showed his interest in that particular student, such as saying in front of everyone that if they need help, he'll be there, asking the students to have lunch with him, and so on. Being teenagers, the jealousy, especially girls, gets bad, and the special students will always end up being bullied or cast away. One of the bullied students realized it, saw the pattern, gathered some proof, and exposed him to the school and posted it online. It was pretty big. There was a rumor that our English teacher had gotten arrested for curb crawling. Nobody believed it until we had a textiles lesson where the teacher asked any questions over how to do a particular type of stitch, and the class clown asked, "Is it true Mr. English teacher got arrested for curb crawling?" The textiles teacher answered, "I don't think everyone needs to know that, Simeon." That some kid had built a room in the ceiling above a closet to hang out and hide his stash of contraband, snacks, or sodas that he'd sell in the hallways. He literally cut a hole in the ceiling of a closet within a closet and snuck a mini fridge up there. Only got caught when he effed up by plugging too many things in and caused power issues in the school. They had an inspector come in to find the issue, and he was like, "Why is there an extension cord going up into the ceiling?" Kid got wind of it and managed to clear everything out. Had a rug, chair, lamp, and other stuff in addition to a mini fridge by the end of the day. They still caught him a few days later, but it was impressive. I went to a school for troubled teens. The structure there was very different. We weren't allowed to smoke, even if we were 18, or even have relationships, like no dating, period. It was a boarding school, so once you were far enough in the program, they would let you visit home for a couple of days. A bunch of wild stuff came out after one particular home visit. One kid lost his virginity, got snitched on, and then all of a sudden like 20 kids were pulled out of class and brought to the dining area. It turned out a bunch of kids had been dating, screwing, and smoking, and it all came out. They drug tested everyone, and that group was the first of our school to be on out-of-school suspension, which created a fun new threat for everyone. It feels ridiculous typing this up now in my 30s, because so what? Some consenting teenagers deafed each other, but at the time it was mind-blowing. Thankfully, that school has closed its doors since.